has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Oh, this is a new show today, and it's the second episode of the Law and Crime author series. And how privileged I am to have the magnificent, the great Barbara Butcher, who I also must admit to is a friend. So I can't, when I hit her with all these great adjectives, I have to admit, I'll testify she is my friend. But she has come out with this book that, I'm not a voracious reader, believe me. I'd rather watch something than read it most of the time. And I picked up Barbara's book and I couldn't put it down. I read it in 3 days. I was very proud of myself. I was going to call my third grade teacher and tell her that she did a good job teaching me. Well, I guess you learned to read before that. Maybe it was the first or second grade teacher. How I just went right through this book because it was so interesting. And it's just the kind of book that it keeps you glued to your seat, and you don't want to put it down because you're afraid that you're not gonna know what happened next. And that's the kind of book. And I want to, before I go any further with this, I want to introduce the wonderful Barbara Butcher. Barbara, welcome.
Wow, what a terrific introduction! Thank you so much, Bill. I know you're an action kind of guy. I don't picture you as a big reader, but I'm glad you liked it. I'm really glad.
Barbara, I wish I was, because I think also as you get older and your brain starts turning to putty, that's the only way you pick up new vocabulary is really to read.
Yeah.
And I noticed that as I get older, my vocabulary is what it was 20 years ago. When I stopped growing, I was a college professor for a while, and I picked up new words from being in academia. And then when you're not teaching any longer, you're just like, let me go back to my street lingo, So,
yeah, you've always been an articulate guy. I mean, no one describes the scene the way you do, right?
well, thank you, Barbara. I want to put your book on the screen, and also probably a very recent picture of you. Well, first I want to put this old picture. I was like, who is that? Oh my God.
Wow, that's like 20 years ago.
Is that Barbara Butcher? Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Right. We all change, we all change in many ways. Some ways we like, some ways we go, I wish I could look the way I looked 20 years ago, but that's not possible. Anyway, here's a most recent photo. And of course, the book is What the Dead Know. And I'm going to read a little bit of the forward. Once you know the smell of death, you can pick it out in a flower shop. Strangely sweet with a bitter undertone, like a strawberry milkshake made with garlic. After a few weeks on the job, I could walk any block in New York and point out a building where someone was decomposing. Barbara Butcher knew what dark places were like. As her lowest point, alcohol addiction cost her nearly everything, including her life. Fighting back from her losses and her self-destructive path, she got sober and landed a job at the medical examiner's office in New York City. I don't want to go any further because I have you here. What the hell would I read your book to my audience for? Barbara, first of all, one of the fascinating things too about you, and the reason I love you, is that you have a great sense of humor. You could have been a stand-up comic. I know you've dabbled in acting like I have, and I also dabbled in stand-up comedy. I was like, something, she's a natural. I should get her to start doing stand-up. But and that was why you were so great when you taught at the criminal investigation course for the NYPD. Everyone loved your course because they were like, oh, she knows her stuff, but she's dark, but then she's funny as hell.
Oh, I love teaching that course. I taught homicide and CIC at the academy. And excuse me, those were some of the happiest days of my life. I mean, what could be better than a room full of 200 detectives, most of them male, most of them a little awestruck. Like, who is this broad? And why is she telling me details of knife wounds? I mean, Jesus, she really goes deep on this. And then suddenly turning it and like explaining to them autoerotic asphyxiation, how to hang yourself during masturbation. And I'd say, all right, guys, don't try this at home. Oh, wait, you in the back there. Yeah, I see you nodding like, yeah, you know. All right, call me. Okay.
Yeah. That's what cops have, a macabre sense of humor, much like you do.
Yeah.
And we have, what's been referred to as a sick sense of humor. But when you see the things that we've seen,
Yeah.
it's really necessary to have that sense of humor, to be
Yeah.
able to joke, because you can't go home to your family. And I remember a couple times going home to my family, and there was this murder I was working on. My son was like 5 or 6 years old. He goes, "Dad, did you get him today? That guy Mundo." And like he knew the names, the characters in the case. And it wasn't like I was talking to my wife and he was listening, and I was like, I wonder if that's okay, that they can hear this stuff. And I didn't usually talk about it a lot at home, but sometimes things would sneak out.
Yeah, and that was one of the hardest things about the job. I mean, we had our humor as a relief from the tension of the horror, the tragedies, the terror that we saw, the evil, if you will. And then you want to talk to somebody, but you certainly can't go home to your partner. I mean, they didn't sign up for this business. You can't go home and tell them about the decapitated woman you saw over on the East River. You can't do that. It's not fair to them. So maybe you want to talk to your buddies, but we always kept up that pose of strength. Like, yeah, I saw this thing today. What a sight. Jesus Christ, that was awful. But did we talk about feelings? Nah. Was that a mistake? In my case, yeah. In my case, the feelings built up and up and up into anger and resentment and fear, fear of evil. And one of the things, they always told us was you have to detach from your emotions. Like we'd walk into a scene, Bill, and see a kid dead on the floor, shot in the 12-year-old, and his parents dead in the living room. And I'd walk in, I'd be like, oh, Jesus, the kid, did he see it coming? And then quick, boom, drop the curtain, detach from my feelings, detach from my thoughts, because I need to do the job, to get justice for this kid, for his family, and to get answers. I mean, there's no way I could feel my emotions, so I shut it down hard. I don't think in the children's scenes I ever made jokes, but sometimes we did on other cases. Yeah, how you doing? How the Yankees doing? Oh, Jesus, this guy looks like he took a hit from a baseball bat. He should have been in the majors.
Right.
But, that was a way to deal, a way to cope. But what happened? Well, when you switch off one emotion, you switch off all of them. And eventually that's going to screw up your marriage, your relationships with your friends. And unfortunately, that kind of went that way.
Well,
What are you gonna do?
Barbara, I don't think it's unique to yourself, and I'm not going to go into it. You can later if you want. But alcoholism is a problem, not just in our profession, the police profession, your profession, lots of professions, stockbrokers, lawyers. It's really how people self-medicate, for the whatever they can't deal with in life. And I think it's, I come from an Irish family. I think out of my family, probably my father was an alcoholic. I got brothers that were alcoholics. So it's a long line of, people would say, and I don't want to say anything prejudiced against Irish people because I happen to be one, but it's more or less accepted in our culture, in the Irish culture, that it's accepted to whereas my wife is Jewish, and that's clearly not an accepted behavior. Like I've had members of our family be concerned about how much I drink,
Yeah.
and I was just like, well, when I'm around them, I got to chill. I can't.
Yeah.
And I think I have a pretty good handle on drinking, especially now. I don't drink much at all. But to them, drinking is having a glass of wine. To us, it's knocking out the bottle and opening the next one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's whiskey with a chaser. Yeah, I mean, alcoholism is rampant in the job, and it is a way to dull those feelings, dull the sorrow you feel. And I was lucky that I got sober before I got the job. I mean, I got the job because I got sober, quite frankly. Um, I was a party girl from way back, and then
Yeah.
it went from party to blackout drinking. Like, it's not so much fun anymore. And on my last drunk, I was completely blacked out, woke up on the floor, tangled up in sweaty sheets, had no idea what the hell had gone on. And long story short, I walked into an AA meeting and I stayed. I went one day, I went the next day, I kept going. And 32 years later, I'm still not drinking. So the the strange thing that came out of it, out of getting sober, was that they give you all these vocational services if you want through New York State EPRA program, the Employment Program for Recovering Alcoholics. So the counselor, they give me all these tests, Minnesota multiphasic, Myers-Briggs, preferential, blah, blah, occupational. And at the end of the testing, guy says to me, Barbara, you should either be a poultry veterinarian or a coroner. I said, poultry? Why poultry? He said, well, you're good with diagnostics. I had been a physician assistant. And he says, you're good with that. But if you work with puppies and kittens, it's going to twist your emotions up. When they die, you feel real bad. But chickens, who cares about chickens? They have beady little eyes. Nobody likes them. Go work with chickens. I said, no, I think I'll take dead people. Because dead people, they're already dead. How could I be upset? Well, I completely forgot that they have families, and those families are grieving and in deep sorrow, and those feelings are all around us. So he said, call the one person in New York City who you think has the best job in the world. So I called Charles Hirsch, Chief Medical Examiner of New York. I said, can I come and talk to you about your work? Yeah, come on in. They wind up offering me a job. It was like, wow, the dream of a lifetime. I had always wanted to be a cop, but back in my day, women weren't as welcome, and people who wore glasses were not as welcome. And my father told me, and he was a deputy inspector, he said, no, you join that force, the city's going to eat you up, chew you, spit you out, they'll ruin your life. And he didn't want me to do it. So now here I got a chance. I can investigate deaths. I can hang out with cops. And I'm a nosy person, not just curious, but nosy. I can probe the lives of New Yorkers, see how everybody lives. Because, we live a lot of crazy ways in this town,
Absolutely.
as you well know.
Barbara, before we jump into, and we've almost did that already, of what your job was like as a medical legal investigator. And I'll have you define that. And I know you were much more than a medical legal investigator. We'll get into that. But let's talk a little bit about your childhood. You grew up on Long Island. Just a little bit. We don't have to go deeply into it. Tell us about your childhood.
I was born in Brooklyn, but raised in Massapequa Park. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because the guy arrested for the Gilgo Beach serial killings lives just a few blocks from me in Massapequa Park, and indeed went to my high school. I went to high school with his sister in my class. And so that's why that's familiar. But anyway, as a kid, I'm very curious and I like science. So my parents buy me a dissecting kit for my birthday and a dead frog in formaldehyde. And I dissect it and I see all the little muscles and nerves and bones and figure out how things work. Wow, this is so cool. So all the kids in the neighborhood start bringing me roadkill, and they bring me a possum. And I say, oh, you see the little zigzag marks across his back? That's tire treads. So his little rib cage got crushed, and that's how he died. He was run over by a car. Ooh, wow. She knows a lot of cool stuff. And then, those little scientist dreams kind of died out as I became more of a party person than a student. But I did, I had periods when I came back to myself and studied and had a decent career. First as a PA and then as a hospital administrator. But then, things happen. You start drinking again, nosedive.
But it seemed, Barbara, that from when I read the book, it seemed that you hated being a hospital administrator.
Hated
You
it.
just you did not take to that job like a duck to water.
No, no, I was bored. I was bored. I had helped, I had gone to Columbia University to get a master's in public health, and I decided to try and get an MBA at the same time. And that was kind of fun. I like learning. I like studying. But then when they offered me this job as a hospital administrator, I thought, wow, this could be really cool. I could make some changes here up in the South Bronx. And I did have some fun with that, building clinics for poor people and such. But the rest of the time I was just bored. And so, again, what I call a God shot. Alcoholism gets me this job. Losing that hospital, getting fired from that hospital job, it gives me the impetus to move into something I really love. And death investigation was the coolest, most interesting career in the whole world. And what could be better? Everything bad that happened became a gift later on because it led me where I was supposed to be.
Isn't it funny, Barbara? Isn't it funny how life is like that? That you
Yeah.
said, "Oh, I wish I didn't do that, but if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be doing this, and if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be doing." So it is funny how the path. I don't know. It's probably called something more poetic than the way I'm explaining it, but sometimes you have to go do some bad things to reach where you want to go.
Absolutely. And I think everything bad that ever happened in my life led me to someplace good. I mean, like, you ever been in a relationship and it's passionate, it's wild, it's romantic, and then it ends and your heart is crushed and broken. And then eventually you get over it, you meet somebody better. And then you look back and say, wait a second, what the hell was I doing with that asshole?
No, because you could see when you're removed from you could see it wasn't right.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? But when you're involved in it, you don't necessarily recognize it that it
And
was.
exactly. And there's a saying, rejection is God's protection. It's like a way to get you out of a bad place when somebody
Yeah, but
rejects
you
you.
have all these good cliches. One of my
Yeah,
favorite things about AA, the expression was the code. Are you a friend of Bill?
yeah, yeah,
It's like a wise guy saying, "Is he a
yeah,
friend of yours or is he a friend of ours?"
yeah,
But a friend of
exactly.
Bill meaning that, yeah, he's in AA too. But I
Yep,
just thought because Bill, who I don't know the guy's last name, he was the founder of AA, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. There's a little code there." But
that's right. Yeah,
are you a friend of Bill? No, that's me. So,
yeah,
all right, Barbara. So let's get into now. Define. I know your title was the chief of staff of the office of the chief medical examiner in New York City. But what your title was when you first started was a medical legal investigator.
that's right.
Describe to our listeners and the would-be readers of your book. Hopefully, everyone's going to buy your book after this. Tell us what a medical legal investigator is and what the person does.
Well, most people don't know about us because we're not on television. You see, on a TV show about medical examiners or coroners, you'll see a forensic pathologist is doing an autopsy, and then suddenly they're called for a murder. So what do? They leave the body on the table and run out? No, that's not real at all. Forensic pathologists like Quincy and all these folks, they don't go to death scenes. They're too busy with autopsies. And an autopsy gives you a cause of death, like gunshot wound, stab wound, heart attack, cancer. But it doesn't give you a context for the death. Like, what's the manner of death? Is it a homicide, suicide, accident, or a natural? And how you find that out is by investigating the scene. So, scene investigators like me, the police call, they say, oh, we got a guy dead in the 3-4 precinct laying in his apartment. Looks like the apartment's been ransacked. Looks like a homicide. So we go there and do an investigation. We examine the body at the scene, take photographs. We explore the scene, look for drugs, medications, weapons, all kinds of things. And we take our photos, we make our determinations as to the nature of this death. And that's all in conjunction with the police. Now, it's supposed to be a completely independent investigation. And it is. Many times we disagreed on a matter of death. But you got to work together, of course. So, for instance, if we suspected a homicide on a death, I would never start moving the body around or examining it until crime scene got there, because I didn't want to lose any evidence. So when crime scene arrived, I'd have done my photos, they did their photos, and then we'd examine the body and I'd show them everything I was seeing. Look here, you see the angle of that stab wound? Oh, and wait, it's got sharp on one side. The other side is kind of blunt. I think we're looking at a hunting knife here with a hilt. So it was a cooperative and mutually beneficial investigation. So then I'd write a report and take my photos, label them all up, and give them to the forensic pathologist. Now, when they did the autopsy, they could say, oh, yeah, gunshot wound, suicide, based on my scene investigation. So that's how that always worked.
Would you attend every autopsy in which you responded to the scene of the potential homicide? Would you go to that autopsy?
I'd try to, but I was working shifts all over the place. I was the overtime queen of New York City. In fact, I was number 3 for the whole city in New York, according to the New York Post. So no, I couldn't see every autopsy. But in the mornings, I'd go on rounds. When you go down to the morgue with Dr. Hirsch, and we'd stop at each table and hear the story of what the investigator saw. I'd tell my story of my cases, and we'd see what they were finding. But I didn't attend everyone.
Barbara, one of the funniest stories I think is, and I ran this by you one time, and I think it was actually in one version was in your book, not because I brought it up, but I said, Barbara, it's very important, and one part of your job is to determine time of death. And there's numerous ways to do that, of course, and the body temperature is one, right? There's decomposition, rigor mortis, alga mortis, putrefaction, all these fancy terms. But the best way to first is to look in the person's phone and see the last phone call they took, because if they were talking to someone on the phone, don't do any scientific bullshit that's going to go against that, right?
That's right. That's like that case I did with the elderly man who was like the patriarch of this huge family. They're all gathered in the apartment, and this 98-year-old guy is laying dead in the bed. And the daughter says to me, oh, can you please find out exactly what time he died so we can have a special mass said for his soul? I said, of course. I was a rookie, and I thought, yeah, I could do anything. And I go in there and I make all my little scientifical calculations, rigor mortis, alga mortis, liver mortis, this, that. And I came out to the room and I said, he died at 11 p.m. And the daughter shrieked, no, I spoke to him at midnight. And do you think, and I said, oh, wait, calculation error. Oh, yes, I see here. Oh, actually, it was, I forgot the most important question of all. When was the last time anyone saw him alive or spoke to him alive? Or did he make any phone calls? It was the most important question of all, and I blew it. And I never made that mistake again, of course.
Right. Or when was even knocking on a neighbor's door? When was the last time you saw him? Oh, I saw him today. Boom.
Yeah.
There goes all the science out the window if it was going to go against when this person last saw him alive. But look, some of that stuff is funny. It's actually funny when you think of it. But again, it's like commonsensical things. Look, in the case of Alec Murdaugh down in South Carolina, which I know you know a lot about, there was so much electronic evidence that, in fact, a TikTok video put him on the murder scene within minutes of the murders. And that was, if you want to say, and a lot of people hate this expression, if you want to talk about smoking gun evidence,
Yeah.
in that case, that was it. And his son took that video and he lied about it and he just couldn't get past that. So today, all of this electronic evidence, cell phone evidence, video camera evidence, in vehicles, computer evidence, it's just unbelievable. And we always have to be aware of that before we get into the other scientific evidence that could go against this other evidence.
Absolutely. And even, look at this again with the Gilgo Beach killer. They were able to triangulate cell phone calls bouncing off towers from Massapequa Park, Midtown Manhattan, where he worked. They put together a beautiful, beautiful timeline based on cell phone calls. Those things, those records, they're there and they'll get you. And of course, CCTV, video cameras everywhere. I mean, you can watch a guy walk to a store, buy a gun, walk out, kill somebody, walk to his house, dispose of the weapon. You can see everything on videotape these days, between doorbell cameras and police cameras and the security cameras on storefronts. It's beautiful. You can watch the whole movie.
It actually is incredible. And I've been out of this biz for almost 12 years now. But we as investigators, you have to be up on this stuff. And I remember even when I retired in 2011, and I was in the detective bureau for 16 years, and my last 10, Manhattan North Homicide Squad. I remember I had guys in my squad that made me look like an elementary school student at the computer and at the cell phone. They were so good at it because they grew up with it. I was in the next generation.
Yeah.
That wasn't taught computers in the school. When I went back to get my master's degree in 2000, I didn't know how to use Microsoft Word. I was like, oh no, and I didn't know how to cut and paste. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. And I slowly learned, but I felt like, look at us, we're walking, look at us, we're talking, as I was studying for my master's degree. And it wasn't funny because I would sometimes have a paper with 7 or 8 pages and I'd hit the wrong button and the whole paper was lost. And I'd be like, ah.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, in my day, they faxed me a handwritten, report sheet, dispatching me somewhere. And I hand wrote my reports, and we used Polaroid photographs back in 92. Then I'd write on the Polaroids and those things are faded away now. And some of that's still good evidence, but now everything is digital. They do it all on computers and tablets and stuff like that. But, I'm going to say one thing that applies to all of us, to you and I, and a lot of the people that have retired since. Nothing beats that talent, the talent for observation, interpretation, detail, and for a basic understanding of human nature that a good detective, a good investigator has. We've got experience of 23 years, 25 years that just working with human beings and doing this job, AI cannot replace it. And computers can't replace it, and video cameras can't replace it. It's good stuff.
Well, over 100%. Before I went to homicide, I was in the 2-3 detective squad in Spanish Harlem, which I thought was personnel-wise, was one of the best squads in the city. These guys were fantastic, And when we would have a homicide, I would just bring everybody in, bring the whole neighborhood in. And that was the old expression, shake the tree. Let's shake the tree and see the coconuts fall out. And one of these coconuts is going to be the information we need to solve this murder. And they used to go Sarge, take it easy. Bring everyone, bring the whole family, and something? It worked to us, but it worked because these detectives were so good at getting people to confess and getting statements and getting people to tell the truth. That's what that was all about. And I learned so much about investigation from those detectives. I was a sergeant too early in my career. 4 years and 10 months, I made sergeant. So I was a patrol sergeant, and I was a plainclothes guy because I was a street crime, and I couldn't wait to get back into plainclothes. It never occurred to me, I want to be a detective boss, So when I
Yeah.
first got into detective, I was a rip sergeant, and I don't want to talk too much about me, because this is about you, but I'm just filling this stuff in. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, investigation's pretty cool. And I think you learned that too from
Yeah.
being a death investigator. And you know what I want to get into, Barbara, is because like the scenes that you've been to, and the science that you apply to these scenes about gunshot wounds, entry wounds, exit wounds. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've been to a scene and go, oh, this is a suicide, you know, but the gun's gone, but I still think it's a suicide. Then you spot the second gunshot wound and you say, this is no suicide. This is no boating accident, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but although we do have that guy that was found down in the financial district with 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, and it was a suicide. But the first shot, it didn't kill him, so he shot himself again. I mean, how much pain do you have to be in psychically, psychologically, emotionally, to be able to withstand the pain of 2 gunshot wounds? How bad do you got to want to die?
Unbelievable.
They're unbelievable, right? But there were times, I mean, just experience and observation. So I go to a case, and I think it was up in the 3-2. It was a tenement apartment, and there was a guy at the base of the stairs, dead, with what they told me was a gunshot wound to his head, right in the center. And you know, they always call me and say, "Barbara, we got a homicide." And I say, "No, it's not a homicide till I say it's a homicide." Right? Because
They
you got to
must have
keep.
loved you.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, you got to keep an open mind, right? You
Sure.
can't walk in saying it's a homicide. You have to observe everything, take the scene in. So the guy's laying at the bottom of the stairs, and there is a hole in his head, and there's also 22 caliber casings, bullet casings in the hallway, like a lot of them, like maybe 2 dozen. And they said, "Oh, looks like he was shot with a 22." And when I get close to the guy, I notice now he's laying face down at the bottom of the stairs, and he stinks of alcohol. And when I noticed the wound, it didn't have the ring abrasion of a bullet wound, and it had more like a laceration look to it, like that stellate, like a little star. I thought, oh, what the hell is that? Then I look, and at the bottom of the stairs where the 2 walls meet in a corner, the lower molding is made of stone, and it comes to a really sharp point at the corner. When I get in real close on that corner, I see that there's blood on it and a little bit of tissue. So what happened is this guy was drunk. He fell down the stairs, and when he got to the bottom, he hit his head right square on this pointed stone coping and killed him just like that. So I'm telling the guys, and I said, "Guys, this looks like an accident to me." And of course, they're happy. That's one less homicide to solve. But they say, "Wait a second, Barbara, what about all these shell casings?" I said, "Let's look around." Now, it's a tenement, so that hallway goes out to the back door to an alleyway. And we walk down the alleyway out to the back door, and there's a big target on the fence of the alley. Turns out that a bunch of kids used this as a shooting gallery, as to play
God.
target practice with a 22 pistol. So once they do the canvas and they talk to the neighbors, they're like, "Yeah, the damn kids are always out there shooting the 22 into the back alleyway." And good, now it's an accident. Okay, but that's just, again, the power of observation, experience, and keeping an open mind. But there were plenty of times where I was fooled, and never could figure out exactly what happened because the evidence was just too ambiguous. For instance, the mummy. There was a squat building downtown in the East Village, you know, where the building was abandoned, but people lived in it and hauled in buckets of water. And we go up to see this guy. He's laying on a bed, and he's a mummy. He looked like a pile of dead leaves. There was no internal organs left, just a skeleton covered with this brown, leathery, peeling skin. So obviously he had died during a dry spell when it was cool, and he just turned into a mummy. In fact, when I went to turn him over by pulling his arm, the arm came off. So
God.
I'm looking at him and I realize, oh, all his internal organs are gone. And this room is full of rats. They're running behind the stove and everything else. The officer says, yeah, it looks to me like the rats ate his internal organs and then it was nice and warm in there for them. So, of course, he didn't decompose. He just mummified. But here's the interesting thing. In his chest cavity, there was a bullet just rattling around in there loose. So the guys say, oh, geez, you think he was shot? Is it a homicide? I said, I don't know. We have no external wounds to look at. It could have been a war wound. It could have been an accident. Maybe he was shot years before and it didn't kill him. He could have done it himself in his suicide, or someone else could have shot him. We will never know if it was a homicide, a suicide, or an accident, or if it even had anything to do with his death. He could have died of a heart attack with a bullet, an old one, just rattling around inside him. Cause unknown, cause and manner unknown, pending police investigation.
Oh, that's the ones they hate. Cuppy, they would call it.
Yeah.
They wanted to kill you. Let's kill Butcher, and then we'll get rid of this case.
Exactly. The dreaded Cuppy. Yeah.
That's right. Barbara, I wanted to also, let's get back to your book and, of course, What the Dead Know. And basically, the title is telling everyone what this book is about, because it's what the dead are going to tell us. And what are they going to tell us through science? But what I want to know from you, and you're alive, obviously, Miss Butcher, I want to know from you, how hard was it to sit down and write this book? And look, lots of it is stored right up in your cranial cavity. And again, we all get times, dates, people, we all get things wrong. But you're remembering, you're sort of what I call synopsizing what your experience. How difficult was that?
At first, it started out easy. It was during COVID. My consulting business was dying out. Nobody was doing anything. So I thought, you know what? I could die of this COVID thing. So all these stories I've been carrying around in my head for years, if I'm ever going to get them out, now's the time. So I start writing the stories of all the cases and all the things I've seen, all the interesting things. And then I hand it to my editor and he says, where are you? I said, I'm here writing. What are you talking about? He says, no, where were you in the story? I want to see you, how you felt, what you smelled, what you saw, what you tasted, everything. I want the reader to be there with you. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. Well, that was emotionally devastating. It's one thing to tell a good story, but it's another thing to show the readers what you felt. And that was really hard. And I'm not going to lie, there were times I cried because thinking about, those girls killed by that serial killer up in East Harlem, that Aaron Key.
Aaron Key, yeah.
Yeah. Those 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. And I thought about how devastated I was at their lives, the loss of their dreams and their hopes. And I just cried and cried. Or the lady who jumped off her roof and had the tattoo from Auschwitz. She was a concentration camp survivor. And I'm thinking, my God, you've survived 50 years after the concentration camps. What could happen now to you to make you want to kill yourself after that? And those lives just washed through me. It was real hard. And then I decided to get honest about, my alcoholism, about how the job affected me emotionally, about what it did, especially 9/11. And to be vulnerable, it doesn't suit me too well. I don't like it. But I decided to go for it.
Barbara, that's, I know you've dabbled in acting. I've dabbled in acting. And one of the hardest things is to let it go, and like do a scene where you get so emotionally involved in this, real tears running down your face. And I would imagine writing is probably acting times two, especially when you are writing about things that you were involved in, and it's got to be, look, and there's a level of PTSD.
Oh,
We all
yeah.
have
Yeah.
those. We all have those pictures popping into our brains at times we don't even want them to pop into our brains, of the horrific things we've seen. And that's what that's what I want to know right now. Why? How did you do it, and how did you cope with it, and how did you bring back some of the things, horrible memories, and how did you deal with it?
When I was first in training, one of the first autopsies I watched, it was being done by Dr. Jackie Lee. It was an 8-year-old girl who had been raped and smothered and thrown in a garbage heap in the Bronx. And I'm looking at this case, at this little pretty little girl, and I'm terror stricken. I'm horrified. It's like evil is staring me in the face. And I said, Jackie, how the hell do you do it? How do you do this job every day and then go home at night? And she said, Barbara, you've got to surround yourself with things of beauty. When you leave here every day, you've got to participate in art and music and dance and love and food, all the good things in the world. And you have to create. You have to. Creation is a bulwark against all the death, despair, and destruction we see. So I thought that was a good lesson. And then I forgot it for a couple of years. But then when things started getting really bad, when I was overwhelmed with the evil, I got myself a little house up in the Catskills in a little abandoned, shitty little town. But it was a cute little house, and I could fix it up. And I had grass and trees and a dog and a cat. And that helped me participate in life again, to see the good of life. And then in time, after World Trade Center, it got bad again. I mean, my God, the things we saw, Bill, were,
Yeah.
Still to this day, I can't hardly describe them. And I started getting like severe PTSD. I couldn't drive past, on Park Avenue, when you hit around 96th Street, those walls that shield the trains, those cement walls. I started thinking, I drive up here every day. That wall's going to collapse on me. Or I bet a car is going to come jumping out through the tunnel and crash into me. I bet my children, my grandchildren, are going to be attacked by pedophiles. Suddenly, everything was a disaster for me. I was hyper-vigilant and catastrophizing everything. Every driver to me was a drunken maniac. Every plane flying overhead could crash at any moment. Because, don't forget, we were doing plane crashes too. Flight 587 right after World Trade Center, the anthrax poisonings, the train crashes. Every time you turn around, there was some other disaster. And so that became a part of my life, was the constant fear of death or maiming. Every car that I saw was going to drive up on the sidewalk and squash me. So I didn't do too well for a while there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you, Barbara, well, how therapeutic was it to write this book?
Very, very therapeutic, because I had not cried about any of these cases before. I hadn't let myself, I just thought, that was such an interesting case. But then in writing it, I felt the feelings, finally, that I had shut down for so long. And now feeling them, mourning those deaths. I had a friend murdered, a guy I was in a play with. He was murdered, and I did the investigation. I'm like, holy shit, that's Manny. Oh my God. So it was very therapeutic to finally feel those feelings, to get it all out, and to be honest about what happened to me and how
Barbara,
I got through it.
Just a quick funny aside. You were telling that story that you investigated a friend's murder, and there's nothing funny about that. But I would be up in Harlem inside a crime scene, and someone would say, "Hi, Professor Cannon." I would just bust out laughing like, "Oh my God!" because at the time I was teaching at a college, and I just thought that was very funny. I had to tell because I know you have a great sense of humor. Now let me get right back to you again, because I don't want. Sometimes I have a habit. My wife always tells me you have a habit of always inserting you into things. Okay, so I'm going to try to get away from that. What do you want people to take away from your book after they have read your book? What do you want them to take? What do you want them to know about Barbara Butcher? What do you want them to know about a medical legal investigator? What do you want them to know about the history of some of the crimes you've gone to? What do you want them to take away from the other look at 9/11 and how, oh my God, that must have been horrific? And I asked you about 5 quick, rapid. I told this is going to be an interview with a detective investigator. Just there's no hot lights this time, Barbara.
There's a couple of things to take away. One is we don't have that long. The death rate is now up to 100%. And we're all going to die. You don't have that long. So take the time to enjoy every second of your life and to be kind. Why not? But mainly, I want people to know that each and every single one of those lives that I investigated, every one of those people that died, they were all important. Each one of us is important. Each one of us is a little universe unto ourselves. We have families and friends and children and all these things around us. So the death of one person has a ripple effect. And it can be devastating. It's painful. And those people, whether they were mopes who got shot in a drug deal or a little old lady who was run over by a car, every one of those lives counted. And the other thing is that we share everything in common. And 99.9% of our DNA is all the same. And we all have hopes and dreams and people we love. And it's a way to connect. This was my way to connect to people, was to write this book. And I hope that in reading it, people see that they have ways to connect to every little stranger is one of us. And I think nothing exemplifies it more than the 9/11 disaster, because there's a saying that one death is a tragedy and 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic. But when you're crawling through the rubble of buildings that you once loved and hunting for tiny scraps of flesh of human beings, and there's smoke and fire and everything around you, and you're scared and you're terrified and you're sick from it, and then you come across somebody's little desk calendar and it says lunch with Jim, 1:00 on 9/11, or a graduation picture from elementary school. Oh yeah, I remember a little pen set. It was a golf ball. It was a souvenir of a hole-in-one on a piece of wood with a little holder for a pen. That was somebody's prized possession. These were not statistics. These were not body parts. These were people with lives just like you and me. And we all have our funny little habits and our crazy little ways. And we're all just like each other. So, and the other thing I'd like people to take away is, particularly people in the profession, all first responders or last responders like me, is that these jobs are incredibly, incredibly tough. We need help. Cops, EMTs, firefighters, medical legal death investigators, we're seeing the worst of what can happen to people, the absolute worst. And yeah, we're strong and we're tough and we can take it, but we need help. It's not about, like in the old days, they said, no, we're strong, we can do it. No, we need someone to talk to. We need to talk to our colleagues about what we've seen. We need to share our feelings because a lot of us are getting destroyed. A lot of us.
Barbara, you said that very well. And, we've done on my show, Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories, we've done a lot of shows on PTSD. We had the great Dr. Stephen Washkel on numerous times and other people that deal with that. And it's true. It's like police departments, if you have a mental health issue, to them, you're damaged goods,
Yeah.
and it can't be viewed that way. They got to recognize that as one of the dangers of this profession, and that they have to treat that danger of this profession. And especially when cops retire, that's when a lot of cops have real problems with suicide, and the PTSD hits them right. And all of a sudden, they were part of this, as they say, a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. They were part of that for 20, 25, 30, 35 years, 40 years, some of these guys. And then they retire and they're like, wow, now I'm just John Q. Citizen. I'm no longer police officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, chief, whatever. And I don't have that title anymore. Barbara, you said something before, a word that brought me back to one of the funniest things. You used the word mope. And that was a word that was so used. In fact, at Manhattan Central Booking, when I came on a job in 1985, I made an arrest. I went down there, and where the perps would get their picture taken, there was 2 footprints on the floor, and it said mope on the floor. And I was like, that is so classic. But, today they would be like, oh my God, paint that up if anyone sees that, But I just, look, that's one of the funny things.
Most people, they don't know the crime of mopery, moping around, just acting bad, acting strange, not acting right. It's just, it's a petty thing. But mopes became
it's a great word. Let me move on. Barbara, I wanted to try to do this in under an hour, but we're so close. 9/11, you mentioned 9/11. And first I want to mention one other thing before. Obviously in the book, your love for Dr. Hirsch is so evident, and a mentor, a friend. And 9/11 was very much also connected to Dr. Hirsch, but it was an event that unless you responded to it, unless you lived through it, you really can't understand it. If you live in Florida, if you live in California, it was a New York thing, and it was almost like also New York came together like I've never seen it come together before. Cops and firemen and everyone were heroes. 3 months later, we were the pricks we had always been. But for 3 months we were this holier than thou representation of New York City, and a lot of that had to do with this horrific incident that occurred. Our country had been attacked. Almost 3,000 people were killed, ordinary civilians working in the building, making a living for their families. And we, the first responders, didn't waver. We went down there and we knew this was bad news, this shit. Although politicians said, oh, the air is perfectly safe. Christine Todd Whitman will be infamous for that statement. As we knew, breathing that in without masks, because when we first got down there were no masks.
No masks.
We were getting bandanas. We looked like the Bloods. We were getting red bandanas from the bodegas. Hey, can we get some some bandanas to put over our face? But then the aftermath of it, and one of these pictures I pulled up, and you can take a look at this. That tells me I remember these were all over the city. And it was so sad to see it. Folks, what it is if you're listening to this podcast and not watching it, family members put pictures of their loved ones who were missing and said, have you seen so-and-so? And these were people that were lost in the towers. And many of them never recovered, or even pieces of their bodies never, ever recovered. And that's something everyone had to deal with. I think that's a great sign. Repose behind this wall are the remains of many who perished at the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. The repository is maintained by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the City of New York. So,
40% of the people, I think it's around 40%, never identified. And, Dr. Hirsch had made a commitment that we would do whatever it takes for as long as it takes until every single victim was identified. And that's still going on today. They're still working on those remains, trying desperately to get a little piece of DNA out of a burned, fragmented piece of tissue. They'll go on forever with that. But,
those freezers, those truck freezers, they're still down there with body parts in them.
No, what we did is we had all those refrigerated trucks, and then we did a freeze drying process that enabled us to keep them in packages in a cool environment. It's lightly refrigerated, but they'll never decompose now. They're vacuum sealed, and they're opened only when we have to do a resampling and then sealed up again. And that process stopped them from decomposing because
Wow.
they were already pretty bad. And you mentioned Dr. Hirsch. He was there, and when the towers collapsed, they fell on him. And I don't know if you remember Diane Chrissy, one of my fellow investigators. Dr. Hirsch was badly hurt. His ankle, the ligaments were torn. He had a 14-inch gash in his arm. He had a head injury. Every one of his ribs were broken. And Diane, her leg was fractured. The bone was sticking out. She had a head injury. And they were thrown on boats and taken over to Jersey. Well, after he made sure that Diane was okay in this hospital over somewhere in Jersey, he went and said to the guys on the boats down by the piers, he said, "Take me back to the city." And they go, no, it's too dangerous. They're not going to let us in. He went and paid some guy with a little dinghy boat. He gave him cash and said, "Get me back to New York." And he went right back to the office. He gave them 10 minutes to sew up his arm, and they gave him a pair of crutches. I don't know how he could even breathe with all his ribs broken, but he got right back in that office, and he got right back to work, and he mustered his people up and said, "We're going to do this. We can do it." So the only man I ever really loved,
Barbara, I thought you loved me.
Yes, but that's more in sort of a physical attraction way.
That's great.
Yeah,
Barbara, it's so. As I said, this book really struck me, and to the point that I read it in 3 days. And I'm not trying to give a sales pitch. People can buy it. They cannot buy it. They can read it. They can have and I understand you're the voice in the what do they call it? The audiobook, right?
Oh, yeah, I did it myself. I read the book out for the audio.
That's fantastic. You got a little acting in there too,
Sure,
you got a little,
yeah.
You got writing, you got acting. It's too bad there was no dancing that you could do, but there was
Not a good dancer.
Well, Barbara, I just again I'll plug this a little bit. The book is called "What the Dead Know." Barbara Butcher, the Chief of Staff of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. I think the years when 1992 is when you first came on the job, and I think you left was it 2014, Barbara?
2015. Yeah.
2015. Okay, and she left in 2015. A lot more lines on your face. Where people can tell, not just me, not just you. I'm talking about myself too. People can tell by looking in your eyes the experience and what you've seen. Yeah. They really can, and it's something like, they look at you and they can see where you've been by looking in your eyes, and it's an amazing thing. And look, I'm a great observer of people because I was, an anti-crime cop for 6.5 years of my 27 years. And of course, a cop should be a great observer. And I've looked at things, I've looked at body language, I've looked at the way people move, and I think I'm pretty good at it, And I just know that this book must have been so difficult to write, but yet in the same vein, Barbara, it's got to be liberating that you feel like a part of you now has been freed up. And don't let me speak for you. I'm just interpreting what I see. A part of you have been freed up through writing this book. And now you're like, all right, give me the next project.
Sure.
Give me one of those movie megaphones. I'm going to be a director now,
Well, actually, there is a show coming out and on Netflix. I don't even know the title yet. It'll be at the end of the year. But I'm working on some television projects right now, looking to develop some stuff. So, we'll see. But yes, it's a huge relief to have told those stories finally, to get those feelings off my chest, and to hopefully maybe people learn something out of the book. At the very least, if you like true crime, you learn a lot about forensics in the book. How to calculate time of death, bullet exits, entries, ballistics, all kinds of stuff.
Make sure you look at that cell phone first.
That's right. Yeah. So, I'm so glad I finally did it. It's like, like giving birth. So,
Well, Barbara, you're a wonderful person, and I'm so thrilled to have done this interview. And a lot of times when I do interviews, of course, on Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories, I have some other things. I could go to a video. I could do this. We spoke for over an hour, and I knew I was going to be able to do it because it was with you. And I feel it's easy to talk to you,
thank you, Bill.
It's not always so easy to talk to everyone. Like if you ask someone a question, they say, no. And then, they say, yes, I agree. And then you're like, I'm going to kill this person if they give me one more one-word answer, I'm going to call Barbara Butcher to investigate this death scene,
Well, you're a good interviewer, Bill, but the main thing is you get it. You understand me. I understand you. We get what we've been through. And it makes a big difference.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Final words, and then I'll let you go.
Final words. You don't have that much time, folks. Be kind to each other. Stay safe.
God bless everyone. Have a great day. This was Law and Crime Author Series with Bill Cannon. And what's your name of your book again? Oh, What the Dead Know by Barbara Butcher. Have a great day, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.